Hi. Hey. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about this New York Times article that came out, I think, a little while ago. I might be late on the uptick, but oh well. It is about the best books of the year so far in 2025. And here's what happens whenever I see a list like this, it ignites this part of me that wants to read everything. I think in some ways it inspires me, but almost in this very consumeristic collectors, I want to catch them all kind of way. That's what the New York Times does to me. Actually, that's what a lot of lists do to me. It starts to, I don't know, pick at the part of me that wants to be well read, that wants to read a ton, that wants to be in on the hottest books, that wants things. It sort of ignites that part of me. I don't know if it does that with you. The skeptical side of my brain immediately shuts down, and the excited, girlish squealing at the top of my lungs, almost like I'm seeing a Beatles concert back in the day, like one of those girls, like she is screaming in my head because I'm so excited about a new list. That's what book lists do to me. And so I almost have to calm that squealing girl down. I have to calm her down. I have to be a reasonable woman and start thinking, how am I going to absorb this list? I want to read it with some interest. I want to be critical. I want to apply it to my life in a way that makes sense. I want all of that. And I have to go about it in a structured way. And then I start to calm myself down, and I take that passion, that thing that triggers the young girl seeing the Beatles. I have to take that and sort of reroute it back into the books that I own, and to be a little more grounded about a book list, rather than looking at the Beatles and saying, "I'm gonna marry you, Paul." I'm like, girl, you're not going to marry Paul. You're just looking at him from afar and admiring his talent, okay? That's what we're doing. We're going to be a little more grounded. If you're new to my channel, oh my gosh, you just got a whole earful of what I'm about. I love books and reading. I love a list. And it can a list can get away from me. It can ignite my desire to spend, my desire to collect, my desire to read everything. And it can really take me off the path of my own reading life and just send me in a weird direction, often one that can be dissatisfying or at least frustrating, or one that spends a lot of money. So I am trying to keep a grounded mindset while still loving and keeping an eye on the book market. And if you're enjoying that vibe, I would encourage you to subscribe. Wow, rambly introduction. But without any further rambling on, let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. When this list first came out, of course, screaming Beatles fangirl is what happened. Then I started to deconstruct the list, and then I can kind of go into the opposite direction, like curmudgeoned old woman, like doesn't want to ever see the sunlight, yells at children on her lawn. And then I sort of go from one to the other and land somewhere in the middle. And I start to deconstruct it. That's like the best way for me to absorb a list like this, is that I start to deconstruct it. And so here's what's interesting is that the New York Times comes out with a list like this. It triggers a bunch of readers to go out, explore the books, read them themselves. And then what happens is that slowly over time, reviews come out of these books. And what's great is that when those reviews come out, I can start to see where I might fall in terms of how it will align with my own reading taste. By getting reviews from others, it will help me understand how I will probably like or dislike the book, like where it will fall with me. So the books that I'm like, okay, you just wait for reviews. That's not super hard. I know you would love to read the book right now, but just wait, because I'm sure that reviews will come out of these books and you will get a better idea of how these books will work with you. So there are two books that, I think two books that land just like wait and see. The first book in this category of wait and see is going to be Heartwood by Amity Gag or Gog. Not really sure. It's supposed to be a slow burn thriller about an experienced hiker who goes missing on the Appalachian Trail. Then 2 other women go and look for her, like try and crack the case. And it's about how these women eventually like find themselves, and it has to do with nature, and it's got this thriller vibe. Funnily, when I read the description, I remembered Eleanor Catton's Burnham Wood. And that came out a couple years ago. People were really excited. It had a very similar description, not the details, but the tagline of a slow burn thriller. And I remember that I was really excited about Eleanor Catton's book. And then as reviews came out, I realized that it was a very, very slow burn thriller. And it had quite mixed reviews. And I ultimately decided, at least for now, not to read it. I just had acquired enough information that I was like, I'm just gonna not read it, even though initially I was really excited about it. So Heartwood is reminding me of that situation, and so I'm going to definitely wait and see, because I don't know if I'm a slow burn thriller reader. The other book is Flesh by David Szalay, S-Z-A-L-A-Y, Saleh, probably Saleh. Okay, so this, this, funnily, I talked about in another New York Times video. I think they were talking about upcoming books to look out for. And I was like, this is so weird. It's this Apple Core, but it looks like an AI generated Apple Core. And I went on and on and on about this cover, only to get not only emails, but lots of comments saying, Shelley, it's the outline of faces that are within the Apple Core. And I think I was like looking at it way too up close. My nose was like right up to the photo, and I needed to back away a little bit to see that it is the profile of 2 faces facing each other that the Apple Core is outlining. I still don't like the cover, by the way, but I also will never forget this experience of everyone telling me, girl, you looked at it wrong, which I did. Thank you so much for telling me. So this book is about a lonely young man, Istvan, who grows up with his mother in a housing estate in Hungary. And then it is, peppered with intimacy and violence and the upper echelons of society. And Istvan advances in his status. It's ultimately, though, about, I forget, there was like a little, it's about something. Oh, male alienation. That's what it's about, which I actually think is a really interesting topic, especially in the time that we're living in right now. I think it's actually probably very relevant, but it's another one where I'm going to wait and see, because I don't know. I don't know this author. I don't know any of his back catalog. I don't know anybody who's ever talked about this author before. And I'm just going to say, instead of making myself the guinea pig for this book, I'm just going to let someone else do that work for me and see if I align with their reading taste and see where I might fall with this book. So I'm going to wait and see. Okay, my next category or like strategy was to be really mean. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm not actually really mean, but I had this moment where I was reading through and they were like, the best books of the year so far. And I was like, New York Times, you're late to the party. Like, bruh, you're late. And that was with the book Stone Yard Devotional by Charlotte Wood. This book was longlisted and might have been even shortlisted for the Booker last year. Now, I know that that means it was probably published in in England, and it wasn't published in the US. This is a US, the New York Times is a US-based newspaper, and so they're going to be based off of the American releases rather than British releases. But I was like thinking, oh my gosh, y'all are talking about old news here. And I also know that y'all watching my channel, maybe this is the first Booktube video you've ever seen, and for that I am so honored. But for most people watching Booktube, you're probably at least kind of in the know with prizes. And if you're reading the New York Times book section, you might also be paying attention to huge international book prizes. So you probably have heard of Stone Yard Devotional by Charlotte Wood. So anyways, this is an Australian book. It's about a woman going back to her going back to her hometown. And oh yeah, there's a plague of mice, nuns coming back, the reappearance of a childhood classmate. It's about a woman, I think, finding herself and going through a lot of very odd situations. It doesn't sound like a bad book, but I'm like, didn't we talk about this last year? Isn't this so old news? So it really burst the bubble on that one. I was almost like, what is this? 2004? 2024? The joke doesn't land when you say it wrong. One of my favorite strategies to pop the bubble of excitement on a book is to think of a book I'd rather be reading, whether it be by that author or on the same subject that is well vetted. So I'd rather be reading. So the first book in this section is We Do Not Part by Hong Kong. I'm very certain that this was included because Hong Kong has just been honored with the Nobel laureate in literature. So the book I'd rather be reading is The Vegetarian, which everybody has read, and there are tons of different opinions out there. And it's one of those books that I'm like, I just think I need to read for my own opinion, and it's just reminding me that I'd rather be reading The Vegetarian by the same author. The next book also feels like old news, but it's not that old, okay? It's not as heinous of a crime as Stone Yard Devotional, but it is Dream Count by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. The reason why this feels like old news is because it was longlisted for the Women's Prize a few months ago, and I don't know, it feels like not super fresh to have it on this list. I don't know why. It feels just... I don't know, it just doesn't feel very fresh, but it just reminds me that I want to be reading, I would rather be reading, which I have it, right here, I'm so prepared. I would rather be reading Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, which is the book that put her on the map. It's the book that everybody has read. Again, similar to The Vegetarian, I've heard tons of different opinions about this. For the most part, pretty good actually. And so it's like, I would rather be reading this book than Dream Count by the same author. And then another book I'd rather be reading is Buffalo Hunter Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. Partly I would rather be reading, I don't know, The Only Good Indians, or I Used to Be a Teenage Slasher, or something else, is because I actually tried Buffalo Hunter Hunter and it didn't grab me. It could have been very much the time in life in which I was reading it. I was very busy with school, wrapping up the school year. Didn't have a lot of brain power to give to very many things. And so I might try this again. It will work perfectly. But when I look at this, I'm thinking, oh, there's a bunch of other Stephen Graham Jones books that people have loved and they've raved about. And maybe I should try one of those rather than his newest, greatest, shiniest book. So the I'd rather be reading is one of my favorite strategies because it reminds me of books that I have on my shelves, or it just helps realign myself with what I actually want to read rather than going after the newest, greatest, most shiniest book by that author. So I have two more books to talk about on the fiction side of this list. The first one, the strategy was, it reminds me of a past self. And the reason I think that some people want to read this book because it does remind them of a past self and they want to be in touch with that nostalgia. For me, it reminds me of a very immature reader that I was, and that I hadn't quite developed an understanding of my own taste until later. And so it reminds me of sort of like this naive Shelley that didn't quite know what I was looking for and didn't quite know what I liked. And so I don't really want to go back to that past self. And it is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. This is a prequel to the Hunger Games, which is fine. But I read the Hunger Games years ago, and they were very entertaining. They actually did the job of getting me back into reading for pleasure. But I feel like I've evolved very much past that stage. I look back on the Hunger Games and think I never really want to revisit them. I have no interest in rereading the series. So why would I go and read a new book, by this author in that same sort of genre? I also just don't like books that feel like a cash grab. I understand that this might not be, but Suzanne Collins continuing to write the same series in the same universe as her mega hit series that was a mega hit a decade and a half ago feels a little cash grabby to me. It doesn't feel sincere or honest. Even if the book is really good, That's the vibe that I'm walking into the book with. There is one book that I am quite interested in, and what's nice is that I was actually interested in it before reading the New York Times article. I'd actually gotten it out from the library, returned it back to the library unread. I have the book on my Kindle. It was gifted to me. And so, all these things are kind of softening the desire to read it because I've already had an interest in it. And so I might steer all of that screaming teenage girl watching a Beatles concert, all of that energy towards this book because I previously had an interest in it, and the New York Times is just reminding me of my interest in the book. It is Isola by Algira Goodman. This is about a 16th century noblewoman who is left or marooned on a desolate island, and I think it's about the way that she is, not gripping her life, the way that she is processing her life, the way that she is reckoning with her past while being alone on this island, or at least in somewhat of remote isolation. I don't know if anyone else is on the island with her. I'm not sure. And also trying to survive. So, survival, isolation, reckoning with one's past. I love all that. And also, Nikki from My Messy Bookshelf had read this book and said that it was like her favorite book of the year. So I'm already getting those reviews come in, and it was, other people have received it quite well, which bodes well for me. And so it's one of those moments where I feel like, oh, that's awesome. Like the New York Times is putting their stamp of approval on a book that I was already interested in. And now I'm like, maybe I should pick it up. And it feels like it's coming from a more natural, honest place, at least in my own soul, than to just see a book for the first time and sort of jump on the bandwagon or take the Times' recommendation without really thinking it through. All right, now we're getting into the nonfiction side of this article. And with nonfiction, I have to be a little more strategic, I have to come up with different things for nonfiction. I feel like I have read so much fiction. I feel very grounded in my opinions as a fiction reader. I know who I am as a fiction reader. Nonfiction, I think, tickles my imagination a little bit more because I'm a little more open as to what I'll read because I haven't fully solidified I have adventurous sides with fiction, but with nonfiction, I haven't, I think, coalesced all of my opinions. Not that I have with fiction, but you know what I mean. I feel a little more open-ended, open-hearted to nonfiction, so I have to have different strategies to back away from nonfiction. So the first category or the first strategy is I don't want to trick myself into thinking I'm that kind of reader. So the first is Careless People. The first book I do this with is Careless People by Sarah Wynne Williams. It's a tell-all, a behind-the-scenes look at Facebook. And of course, status-hungry, self-absorbed leaders and Facebook's ickiness. Okay, like that's what she's talking about. And the thing is that I think on the surface, I'm like, I have had Facebook for years. I've had different relationships, different phases of my life with Facebook, and I could read something that tells me more about this icky, crazy company. And then I'm like, look, I don't really like, and I've never really read, and I've never been the kind of reader. I've never been the kind of reader who's drawn towards tell-alls about icky corporations. One of the books that stands out was Empire of Pain by Patrick Radden Keefe, which I liked but didn't love. And that was about, the prescription pain medication industry and the money-hungry aggression of its founders, which I thought was really interesting, but to me that was the exception to the rule. It wasn't the rule itself. So I'm not that kind of reader, and I don't want to trick myself into thinking I'm that kind of reader who likes the tell-all behind, like the story behind a corrupt company. I'm willing, see, this is the thing. I'm willing to be that kind of reader, but am I? And I'm like, no. And I'm not going to start here. There are other books that have been on my list for longer that I would rather start with in terms of like pulling the behind the scenes like curtain of a company than Careless People. So yeah. Then the next one is Yoko by David Sheff. It is the biography of Yoko Ono. I've obviously mentioned the Beatles a bunch. I'm a Beatles fan, but I'm not a Yoko Ono fan, and I don't really care about her relationship with John Lennon, and I don't want to trick myself into thinking that I'm into reading celebrity biographies or that I'm into reading about celebrities, especially musicians and actors. Earlier this year, I read Kelly Bishop's The Third Gilmore Girl, which was good. I'm a huge Gilmore Girls fan. I was the ideal reader for this book, and to me, it was just okay. So I have to remind myself about that before I jump in and thinking, oh, the Times wrote about, is recommending Yoko, and I love the Beatles, and maybe I would love to know more about the Beatles. And I'm like, no, girl, then read about the Beatles and not about Yoko. Okay? Back off. The next strategy is I'd rather be reading something else by that author or something else on the exact same subject. So the first one is The Fate of the Day by Rick Atkinson, who is a Pulitzer Prize winning author. Tons of history books out there. I've heard he's very readable. I've not read anything by him. I think my dad has, and he's very readable. Great author. And The Fate of the Day is actually the second installment in a trilogy that he's writing about the Revolutionary War. And I'm like, I would rather be reading the first book in that series, or I'd rather be reading something else by that author that has been, very well vetted, recommended by Steve. I don't know what Steve thinks of this book, so why would I pick this up? And then the next one is There Is No Place for Us by Brian Gladstone. This is going to be a book about, it's going to be like a journalistic reporting about homelessness in Atlanta, I believe. Yeah, the city of Atlanta, Georgia. And it's going to be looking at 2010 to 2023. Oh, no. It's using very current years. I'm going to back away from the sentence I was going down. It's using very current data, so 2010 to 2023, about how rent has just skyrocketed in that time. And it's going to be following some families who are struggling to make it, and obviously discussing homelessness along the way, which is interesting because it reminds me at least a little bit of Evicted: Poverty and Profit in the American City by Matthew Desmond, which is vetted in the terms that it has won the Pulitzer Prize for General Nonfiction in 2017, and it's talking about poverty in the Milwaukee area using a similar time frame following the financial crash in 2008, and talking about how I think it's very similar. It follows some families and how they are barely scraping it together. And just the housing crisis that we're still having with rentals in the United States today. And so it's a very, very similar topic. I am sure that the writers take different approaches on it, but I'm like, oh, if what you want is this topic, then why not go for the book that your library probably already has, in which it has no holds. And I think actually Ted, my husband, purchased Evicted on his Kindle and was reading it. So there's all of that, all of this data that points us to reading something of very similar like subject matter, and I would probably get a very similar feeling and very like it's so closely aligned to the book that sounds so good that the New York Times is recommending, but I wouldn't have to spend any money on it. And oh my goodness, I wouldn't have to spend any money on it. My phone is going off, and I have it readily available right now. And it's probably even better because it won the Pulitzer Prize for Nonfiction. Not saying that just because it's a prize-winning book, it means that it's great. It just means that I could probably find a lot of great reviews on it and really decide if this is for me, rather than trying to hunt down reviews on There's No Place Like Us by Brian Gladstone. I hope that makes sense. My last strategy is kind of sad, but it's okay. We lived through it. My second to last strategy is I probably have something else on my shelves that fulfills the same desire. And the first book is I Seek a Kind of Person by Julian Borger. So this is about a writer for The Guardian who finds some interesting information about Jewish parents in Nazi Europe. And his dad was somebody who fled to Wales in 1938 and who ultimately died by suicide. And so it's part memoir, part investigation into his family background and uncovering more about his father's experience. And so it's, you know, it's that genre of writing that has gotten quite popular. And actually I have, let me get it again, I'm so prepared. I have An Exclusive Love, which is a memoir by Johanna Ajorn. And this is actually about the author's grandparents who survived concentration camps. And they were found in their bed hand in hand after they took their own lives. But it is this young woman telling her grandparents' story of survival. And I think it's giving me very similar vibes. My camera battery was like, nope, you're done. We're cutting you off. So anyways, I think what excites me about a book like this, I seek a kind of person. What excites me about a book like this is that it's going to give me a really interesting and maybe fresh perspective on the Holocaust. And the thing is that I already have a book that will probably give me a fresh perspective on the Holocaust, which is this one, which I'm holding upside down, An Exclusive Love, which I've been meaning to read, and I will feel more gratified reading this because it will get a book off my shelf that I haven't yet read, so on and so forth. And so I, it's like I already have something that will do what this is giving me the desire to fulfill, like a fresh perspective on history that I did not yet know. And then the next book that also sounds really interesting is Raising Hair by Chloe Dalton. Now, here's what's interesting is that tons of people have already said this book is so good. And I love this kind of book, which is a connection between a human and a creature and observations on behavior, and like it being partially memoir and partially about the creature in present day. And I love books like this. I mean, some of my favorite books are this. So we have Fox and I, which I can't remember the author right now. The Soul of an Octopus by Cy Montgomery. That one book. Oh my gosh. Ring of Bright Water by Kevin Maxwell. Fantastic book about a man and an otter. And then what is the last one that I'm thinking of? The owl book, the falconing book. I cannot remember. Owl and falconing are very different. H is for hawk. H is for hawk. Okay. So I have all of those books that have to do with a human and a creature and figuring them out. It's so good. I love this kind of book. And Raising Hair by Chloe Dalton is getting just a ton of love and a ton of praise right now. It is about her experience with a little bunny rabbit, which just sounds so good. Okay, it sounds so good. But here's the deal. I have so many. I have books on my shelves that I should be reading. What is it? I can't remember. There was a tree book, Tree Girls. The book that I own that will probably fulfill this desire is Lab Girl by, I can't remember. I have it over there. Lab Girl by Hope Jaron, which I know is about a woman and her connection with trees, but also her memoir and all of that, infused. And so here's the deal. Like, I know I like these kinds of books. I will keep Raising Hair on my mind and in my heart. But if I really, really, really wanted to indulge myself, I already have a book that talks about humans and nature in some way. And I'm sure I have more than just that. I have more than just that. And so then Lab Girl by Hope Jaron. But I do have Lab Girl if I'm like, I want it right now. And instead of going out and spending money or feeling bad that I can't read the book that I want to read, I can just reroute that desire to something on my own shelves. My last strategy is I may just have to wait. And it means that this book might just fade in my memory, even though it's like right up my alley and it does sound really good. I might revisit it later, or maybe my library will get it, or maybe it's just, but I'm just going to have to wait. I'm just going to have to eat it, and I'm going to have to wait. And it's called The Containment by Michelle Adams. So here's what happened. The Brown versus the Board of Education happened in 1954, meaning that you cannot segregate schools anymore. And what happened is that in Detroit, Michigan, 20 years after Brown versus the Board of Education was ruled, the Detroit schools were almost totally segregated. So all the way up until 1974, there was still segregation in that city, which is just weird and odd, and I've not heard about this, and yeah, I do know quite a bit about the Brown versus the Board of Education. Anyways, so it says that she explores how this happened, the failed efforts to integrate, and the implications for public education and civil rights today, which is right up my alley. I am an educator. I have been for almost a decade, and it's something that I'm very interested in. And that I have been interested in, and something that I studied in school, blah, blah, blah. All the reasons as to why this is good. And it sounds great. It sounds great. And I'm just going to have to wait. I don't have anything on my shelves that would fulfill this desire. It sounds really fascinating, like a juicy piece of history that I don't yet know about. I'm sure it's probably well written, all the things, right? And yet I'm just going to have to wait. So yeah, that's it. That's what I'm doing about this list. I think it's a fascinating list. I think there are some really interesting options. As always, I feel like the New York Times is very calculated in what they are putting on the list. There's, of course, one horror, one historical fiction, one nature and human memoir, a couple books on history, a couple of translated works. It's all sort of like evenly dispersed, which always makes me sort of, I don't know, scratch my head about it. But that's okay, because sometimes I think, like, for myself as a reader, it's not always evenly dispersed. As much as I try, or as much as I may try, or anybody may try, it's not going to always be evenly perfect. So that always, makes me raise an eyebrow. But we're going to stop talking about being skeptical about the New York Times. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've read any of these books. That always helps. It helps me get more information about what I might like. And it's always very helpful for everyone else who reads the comments, because I know you all do. I'm going to stop yammering on. Thank you, Yakin. Is that right? Yappin, not yakin. Oh my gosh. Okay, I gotta go. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope to see you all very soon in my next one. Bye.